They laughed when she pushed the mop bucket past the hangar. They laughed every morning she arrived in her faded overalls and squeaky boots, head down, hands calloused. To them, she was just the cleaning lady, the one who wiped their messes and stayed invisible. Until one day. The alarms went off, a pilot down, an emergency scramble. No one was ready, no one qualified. And yet, someone stepped forward. She didn't ask, she didn't explain. She walked past the shocked faces, past the open cockpit, and climbed in like she had done it 100 times. Because she had. And when that jet sliced through the Arizona sky, everything they thought they knew about Clarissa Dean shattered into dust. You see, stories like this don't happen by accident. They brew quietly, beneath years of silence, behind uniforms that no longer fit, and under names people forget. Clarissa Dean wasn't always invisible. Years ago, she wore a different uniform, a flight suit, with medals, with mission logs carved in the clouds of Afghanistan and Iraq. But the world moved on, and so did she. Or at least, that's what they believed. They never asked why her eyes scanned the sky when a jet roared overhead, why her fingers twitched at the controls during simulator drills she wasn't supposed to watch, or why, when no one else could fly, she didn't hesitate. This isn't a story about a janitor who dreamed of flying. It's about a fighter pilot who never stopped being one, even when the world refused to see her. And today, you're about to discover how that woman, forgotten by the system, dismissed by her peers, and erased by time, became the unexpected hero of an airbase that once ignored her. Because sometimes, it takes a crisis to remind the world who you really are. Let's rewind to where it all began. Not in the cockpit, but in a quiet storage closet, under flickering lights with a mop in hand, and a secret too powerful to stay buried. Greenfield Air Base stretched like steel and fire against the Arizona horizon, dry, hot, and always in motion. Jets thundered overhead at dawn, and boots hit the concrete before the sun even had time to blink. Everyone here had a purpose. Everyone had a rank. Everyone except her. Clarissa Dean arrived every morning before the junior cadets. Same blue overalls, same faded name patch, no title, no rank, just Dean, stitched in thread now frayed from age and bleach. She didn't stand out. She didn't speak much. But she moved with a precision that didn't quite match her job description. Her cart was always in order, her tools spotless, and her routes timed to the second. No one noticed, at least not in ways that mattered. "Morning, Dean!" The young men would nod, barely pausing between their banter. "Hey, can you hit Hangar 3 today? We spilled some Gatorade." No one said thank you. No one asked how she was. And that was fine with her, because Clarissa wasn't looking for attention. She was looking for quiet, for something the roaring world had stolen long ago. 8 years earlier, she had walked away from everything, her rank, her wings, her legacy. Not because she wanted to, but because duty at home had outweighed duty in the sky. Her husband, once a proud staff sergeant, had passed in a car accident while she was stationed overseas. Their daughter, just 9 at the time, needed a mother more than the Air Force needed a pilot. So Clarissa put away the flight suit, hung up the medals, and traded her helmet for a mop. Greenfield offered her a civilian janitorial role out of respect. A quiet thank you no one voiced out loud, and she took it. Because the truth was, after flying at Mach 2, watching from the ground felt unbearable. But raising her daughter in safety? That was a different kind of mission, and one she never regretted. Now, years later, That daughter was grown and studying at the Naval Academy. Clarissa? She stayed. Not because she had to, but because in some strange way the hangars still felt like home. Most of the airmen never knew her story. Some whispered rumors. She used to work intel. Nah, just a base legacy hire. No way she ever flew. Even Lieutenant Marcus Vaughn, a rising star in the cadet program, dismissed her presence. She's always around, man. Like a ghost with a broom, he once joked. It wasn't cruel, just careless. The kind of forgettable comment that came from never really seeing someone. But every time Clarissa passed the simulator room, her gaze lingered. Every time a jet roared overhead, her spine straightened just a bit. And every time someone asked, "What's a janitor doing here this late?" she simply smiled and kept moving. What they didn't know was this. Clarissa had logged over 1,200 flight hours. She had led escort missions in hostile airspace. She had landed in sandstorms, evaded missile locks, and trained some of the very commanders these cadets idolized. But none of that mattered anymore. Not in a world that only saw her for the badge on her overalls. Not in a base where time had buried her rank beneath daily routine. Still, she stayed. Because even shadows remember the light. And somewhere, deep in her bones, Clarissa knew. If the sky ever called again, she'd be ready. It started like any other Tuesday. Clarissa was mopping the corridor outside the briefing room when the door swung open, laughter spilling out like smoke. A group of cadets, barely past 20, faces still fresh with ambition, strolled past her, ignoring her completely. Until one of them, a tall, brash trainee with too much ego for his own good, stopped. "Hey, watch the wheels, Chief," he said with a smirk, pretending to trip over her mop bucket. "Wouldn't want a janitor to file a safety report." Laughter erupted. Even Lieutenant Vaughn, usually more composed, cracked a grin. Clarissa didn't flinch. She just kept mopping. Another voice chimed in, this one sharper, meant to sting. "You ever wonder if she even knows how jets work? Or if she just likes being around the smell of kerosene?" Someone added, "Maybe she used to clean the cockpits, too." Got nostalgic. Clarissa paused, just for a breath, then kept moving. But Lieutenant Vaughn, perhaps sensing the moment had gone too far, tried to lighten the blow. "Come on, fellas. She's been here longer than all of us. She probably knows more about base layouts than command." It was meant to be kind, but it landed like a slap. She probably knows base layouts, as if her legacy boiled down to janitorial geography. That evening, Clarissa sat alone on the bench near Hangar 12. The desert wind brushed through her graying hair, and in the distance, a fighter jet screamed across the horizon. She watched it climb, cut through the sky, and vanish behind the mountains. Her fingers flexed slightly, instinct, not memory. In another life, she would have been up there. Now, she was just trying not to be seen. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. The next morning, a red alert blared across the base. Simulated emergency exercise, immediate scramble, lead pilot down. Secondary pilot unavailable, chaos ignited, men shouted, commanders sprinted. 2 visiting generals watched from the tower, part of a surprise evaluation drill. The base had to respond flawlessly. But it wasn't flawless. In fact, it was falling apart. No one could get the backup aircraft online. The junior pilots weren't cleared for high-speed maneuver drills, and command needed someone, anyone, qualified to take the air in the next 7 minutes. Clarissa was waxing the hallway when the alert came through the overhead speaker. She paused, mop handle resting in her gloved hands. From the far end of the corridor, she could see the panic flooding into the control bay. She waited, listened, and then, without a word, she stepped into the ready room. All eyes turned. No one spoke. She took off her gloves, rolled up the sleeves of her coveralls, and with calm precision she said the words that would change everything. "I can fly it." At first, silence. Then someone scoffed. "You? Ma'am, this isn't a dust-off chopper, it's an F-15E. Clarissa didn't blink. "I know what it is, and I know how to fly it." Lieutenant Vaughn stood in the corner, stunned. "Wait, what do you mean you know how to—" She didn't answer. She simply walked toward the locker bay, typed a code none of them knew she remembered, opened a metal case, and pulled out her old flight gloves. For a moment, the room stood still, not because they believed her, but because something in her posture, her stillness, her command, made them doubt everything they thought they knew. The commander stepped forward. "Clarissa Dean, are you certified?" She looked him straight in the eye. 1,267 logged hours, combat tested, air medal recipient. You can check the file. But while you're doing that, this base is still failing the drill. There was no speech, no grand declaration, just the soft sound of Clarissa sliding her gloves on, like she had done 1,000 times before. The flight deck fell into stunned silence as she marched across it, not with hesitation but with purpose. Her janitor's uniform still clung to her like an old rumor, but something in her gait made everyone stand a little straighter. Outside, the sun had begun its slow climb. The air shimmered over the tarmac, and the jet waited, cockpit open, turbines idle, like a beast without a master. A few crewmen stared. One tried to stop her. "Ma'am, that aircraft is in high-level sim mode. You can't—" "I can," she said, stepping up onto the ladder. "And I will." She climbed in without flinching, strapped herself into the harness with the familiarity of muscle memory. Her fingers glided across the switches like a pianist returning to a forgotten melody. Then, the engines ignited. A thunderclap rolled across the base. People ran to the windows, officers grabbed radios, but no one dared stop her. In the control tower, General Brooks, the highest-ranking official on base, leaned forward, squinting at the flight log. "Who authorized this?" "Sir, we're checking, but it looks like she's already airborne." And she was. The jet lifted off like it had been waiting for her all these years. Not just flying, commanding the sky, spirals, rolls, perfect vector, turns. She hit every marker on the simulation script with such precision that the visiting evaluators thought it was pre-recorded flight data. On the ground, mouths hung open. Lieutenant Vaughn watched through binoculars, his voice barely a whisper. That's not possible. But it was. Clarissa Dean wasn't just flying. She was rewriting everything they believed about who she was. Every barrel roll was resistance. Every perfect climb was a rebuke. She wasn't proving herself. She was reminding them, "I've always been this. You just chose not to see it." In the observation room, someone finally pulled up her service file. There it was. Colonel Clarissa J. Dean, former squadron leader, combat certified, retired honorably with commendations. A wave of discomfort swept the room. How had they missed it? The moment she touched down, the air hung thick, not from jet fuel, but from silence. The kind of silence that comes when shame meets awe. She unstrapped, hopped down, and for the first time in 8 years, someone saluted her. Lieutenant Vaughn stepped forward, his voice tight. "Ma'am, I didn't know. Clarissa gave a slight nod. Not angry, not smug, just tired. You didn't ask. It wasn't just a line. It was a mirror, a lesson, a line drawn in sand. That flight didn't just save a failed simulation. It shattered an invisible ceiling. It turned a janitor into a legend. Not by changing who she was, but by finally forcing the world to recognize what she had always been. And the jet? It never flew the same again. Because once you've seen power hidden in plain sight, you never forget where it came from. By noon, the entire base knew. The woman they once dismissed as just the janitor was now the center of every whispered conversation, every hurried file search, every shaken head in disbelief. Her personnel file, long buried under layers of civilian status, was finally unlocked. Colonel Clarissa Dean, Flight Commander, Air Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster, Silver Star for Valor Under Fire, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 3 rescue extractions under combat pressure, flawless record, voluntary discharge, and then 8 years of silence. In the officers' briefing room, Commander Reynolds stood before his team, Vaughn included, holding the printed file like it weighed 100 pounds. "We failed her," he said. "Let's not pretend otherwise." No one spoke. Because what do you say when your assumptions just crumbled into dust? Clarissa, meanwhile, had gone back to work. After the flight, she didn't wait for applause. She didn't linger in the hangar to explain herself. She returned her gloves to the locker, picked up her mop, and continued cleaning the east hallway. It wasn't pride, it wasn't defiance, it was who she was, and she didn't need their validation to breathe. But this time, things were different. Everywhere she walked, eyes followed, respectfully. Doors opened, cadets nodded. The same men who once joked about her now stepped aside, not because they were told to, but because they knew better. Even Vaughn. He found her outside the flight control building that afternoon, wiping down a bench near the entrance. He hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Colonel Dean?" She didn't look up, not immediately. Then, with the same quiet grace she carried through the sky, she met his eyes. "Lieutenant Vaughn." There was a long pause, the kind that sits heavy on a man's chest. "I owe you more than just an apology. I owe you my respect and my shame. I looked at you every day and never once thought to ask who you really were." Clarissa tilted her head slightly, almost smiling. "That's the thing about uniforms, Lieutenant. You wear the right one, and the world listens. You wear the wrong one, and you disappear." He nodded. It hurt, but it was true. "If there's ever anything I can do, you can learn," she interrupted gently. "Learn to look past what you're told to see. Not just with me, with everyone." Then she stood, not taller. She didn't have to. But somehow, more visible than ever before. Later that week, Commander Reynolds formally addressed the base in a recorded meeting. "Let the name Clarissa Dean be written into our legacy, not because of the rank she once held, but because of the grace with which she carried the weight of being ignored and still chose to serve." The clip went viral on military forums. Old comrades from her squadron sent messages. Former commanders wrote letters. One of them said, "Clarissa Dean was one of the best pilots I ever knew, and one of the strongest leaders I never appreciated enough." But perhaps the most powerful recognition came not from above, but from the young. A group of cadets created a plaque. "To Colonel Dean, the sky never forgot you." It now hangs in the training wing, right above the simulator room, the same room she used to mop at midnight, while the next generation learned to fly. Respect doesn't arrive with a trumpet. It settles slowly, like dust finally choosing where to rest. In the days that followed Clarissa Dean's flight, Greenfield Air Base didn't just move forward, it looked inward. Changes began, not from policy, but from people. Cadets who once ignored her began to ask real questions, not out of guilt, but out of genuine curiosity. Who else had they overlooked? Who else walked these halls carrying stories in silence? The base held an informal forum one evening, an open floor for anyone who felt unseen. It started small, a technician, a mechanic, a junior logistics officer. Then more came forward, stories of service, of sacrifice, of being quietly exceptional in places that only celebrated noise. Clarissa sat at the back of the room. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her presence alone gave others the courage to raise their voices. General Brooks authorized a new mentorship initiative, Legacy in Plain Sight, a program pairing veterans in civilian roles with active trainees. Clarissa was the first name on the list. At first, she resisted. "I didn't do this to start a movement," she said, to which Commander Reynolds replied, "No, Colonel, but the way you've lived is the movement." And so she stayed. Not as a janitor, not even as a symbol, but as an educator, a living blueprint of resilience, humility, and unshakable competence. Lieutenant Vaughn requested to train under her directly. She hesitated, but then she saw it in his eyes, the shift. Not just admiration, not just respect, but readiness to unlearn and relearn. She agreed under one condition. No sirring, no ma'aming, no spotlight, just listen. And he did. For the first time in his career, Vaughn flew with someone who didn't chase rank, but chased excellence. She broke down every maneuver with surgical clarity. But what stuck most weren't the flight techniques. It was what she said on the ground. It's easy to lead when people know your title. It's harder, and far more important, when they don't. That became his mantra. Outside the base, her story spread. Military blogs picked it up. Then a major news outlet ran a segment titled "The Colonel in Coveralls." Thousands commented. Veterans, widows, women who had walked away from glory to raise families or care for aging parents. They didn't just see Clarissa, they were Clarissa. Her daughter Maya wrote her from Annapolis. "Mom, they showed your flight in our leadership class. Everyone was stunned. I just sat there trying not to cry. You weren't just my mother. You were the pilot I wanted to be." Clarissa kept the message in her locker, right next to a photo of her husband, and the air medal she once thought no one would remember. Greenfield Air Base was never the same again. Not because it got louder, but because it started listening. Listening to the people behind the roles, the lives behind the labels, the hands that build greatness in silence. Clarissa Dean didn't fight to be seen. She didn't shout for justice. She simply flew, once. And it was enough to wake an entire culture. Because sometimes, the quietest voice carries the sharpest truth. Clarissa Dean didn't set out to make a statement. She didn't ask to be remembered. She didn't demand applause. She never posted about the day they laughed at her. And she never bragged about the day they stood in silence as her jet kissed the clouds. All she ever wanted was to serve. And when that time passed, she wanted peace. But life doesn't always leave you alone, especially when you carry something the world still needs to see. You see, this story isn't just about a woman rediscovering her wings. It's about what we choose to see and what we so often ignore. Every day, we pass people whose greatness is hidden beneath uniforms we don't respect. We speak louder than those who've quietly endured more than we'll ever understand. We assume that worth wears a title, that excellence announces itself, that history shouts, but it doesn't. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sweeps the floor. Sometimes it keeps its head down until the moment comes to rise. So what's the lesson? Maybe it's this. Never mistake silence for absence. Never confuse humility with weakness. And never ever assume you know someone's story until you've earned the right to hear it. Because the truth is, you could be working beside a war hero. You could be learning from someone who built the road you're walking on. You could be looking down on someone who once stood where you hope to stand. And when that person rises, when they step into their moment and remind the world who they are, don't be shocked. Be grateful. Clarissa Dean's name is now etched in the flight hall at Greenfield. But more importantly, she's remembered in the hearts of those who saw her fly, not just in the air, but through years of disregard, through quiet perseverance, through the weight of invisibility. And to the cadets she once mopped around, she didn't just teach them how to fly, she taught them how to see. So maybe the next time you meet someone who seems small, ask yourself what you're not seeing. Maybe they were once a fighter pilot. Maybe they still are. Life application. To the one watching this who feels overlooked, who's working a job below your potential, who's hiding a past that the world forgot, who's holding back not because you can't, but because you're waiting for the right moment. Don't lose yourself. Don't stop believing. Your cockpit moment will come. And when it does, fly like Clarissa. Not to prove anything, but to remember everything you already are. If this story moved you, leave a comment. Have you ever been overlooked because of your race, your job, or just the way you looked? Or have you ever misjudged someone only to realize their truth later? Share your story below. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear today. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true stories that reveal the dignity hiding in plain sight. This is Daily Racism Stories, where silence becomes legacy. And if you've ever been treated as less than because of your skin color, your accent, or your silence, tell us, because your experience matters, and someone out there needs to know they're not alone.